Hi, Mike. How are you?
Well, we're okay. We're getting a little worried about you since we're a little bit late. We haven't been able to locate you.
Yeah, I had some technology troubles.
Well, you're live on the radio right now. So
Great.
If you'd like to reschedule, we could hang up and I'll reschedule with you for sometime next week. But just wanted to circle around and make sure that you are all right.
I appreciate it. No, we can go ahead and do this now, and if it's totally up to you.
We've only got about 40 minutes left, so I was hoping to get some in-depth coverage. If you want to give a little overview of what the story is, I'll give you a call. I'll schedule with you again later.
Okay, Mike, it's your call. You just let me know what works for you. I'm happy to give you an overview, a brief synopsis, and follow up another time, or do the whole thing another.
Well, why don't we go ahead and take the brief synopsis now? We've got about 8 minutes to our next break. Give us an overview. We can hang up on the break then, and then we'll get you back sometime next week.
That sounds good, Mike. Well, let me just first say I don't disclose anything that could be in violation of my security oath or my oath as an officer of the United States Army. I only discuss things which are unclassified that came to me through various sources. So I'm not discussing anything that's top secret that could get anyone into any trouble. And this is not about me. This is not about a personal interview for aggrandizement or vengeance or revenge or anger or getting back at anyone. This is simply, as I see it, an officer of the United States Army reporting matters which I constitute as treason against the United States, giving aid and comfort to the enemy of the United States, up the chain of command to my military chain of command, to my political congressional chain of command, and because of the lack of activity, to the media and to people like you who are brave enough to take this forward and share it with your listeners, to let them know really what's been going on, to let them decide if this is something that warrants, their personal action, engaging their political leaders and making noise about this, and also taking it to the courts. I think there are grounds for a variety of federal constitutional violations that have occurred in this matter. So that's my driving force. I'm simply doing my duty as an officer of the United States to make this known, because it compels me, and there's no other motivation than that. Kerry Cassidy of Project Camelot was the first one to really let this begin to come out, and I'm so glad that you did too. That's very inspiring to me that there are people out there that are strong enough and willing to take this and share it with their listeners, because I've had a lot of journalists tell me this is very dangerous. There are a lot of people who are dead because of this. Michael Hastings is one of them. So anyone who takes this on needs to do it as a team effort with as many people around them as possible, and really blitzkrieg it, run fast and move forward very, very quickly, so no one can make up any spin or excuses or lies about this. And the simple synopsis of it is, I discovered in my role as a military officer and as a defense contractor for Booz Allen Hamilton, I was assigned at the top levels of terrorism, counterterrorism, military agencies, commands, State Department, Special Operations, Central Command. And besides developing psychological warfare techniques and information operations against Muslim radical terrorists, I was also assigned to find the money sources, find the banks and the couriers and the donors and the countries that were channeling funds to the enemies of the United States in the U.S. Central Command area of operation. That's all of the Middle Eastern countries: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Yemen, Iraq, Iran, Jordan, all over, Kuwait. And what I discovered were terrorist sources, terrorist banks that were not being stopped. And as a result of this, soldiers were being wounded and killed. And I felt
really what you tracked down was those who were providing the financial and material support to those who fund terrorism.
That's exactly right. And the big revelation that's interesting in this, it takes on sort of a dramatic element that you couldn't make up. It was a miraculous turn of events, as I ran into the Swiss banker who was prosecuted by the Justice Department and the Obama administration. I ran into him, in prison when the government tried to shut me down and quiet me, as they did to Susan Lindauer and others. And I run into this guy, and he gives me all of the information about the Swiss bank accounts that he had been trying to get up to the chain of command in the government and the military, Brad Birkenfeld. And it was an amazing turn of events to sit down with him over 6 months and go through every account and every bank and every liaison that was going on. And it was also infuriating to discover that he had been told by the Justice Department, do not say a word about this to anyone, and he was denied the opportunity to present this to the military. That's why I wrote my report to the military exposing all of this. And to my amazement and disgust, not a single person in the military ever responded or did anything about this. Despite my multiple letters and reports, I was told point blank, no one is doing anything about this. They're not going to. Stop submitting reports. And that was infuriating, because I remember when I was working as an analyst, I had soldiers in the Middle East calling me about funds that they were finding, pallets full of money, bombs and bullets that they were discovering in a lot of the missions, and they were trying to track down where this was coming from, who is funding a lot of this material. And a lot of the soldiers that were calling for, it's called a task duty, where they call back in the United States and task you with something. Sir, we found money, or we found sources, or we found paperwork and documents. Where is this coming from, so we can track it down, trying to get the choke points? And all of the stuff that I found out much later, had I had it at the time, a lot of these soldiers who were on these missions would be alive today. We would have found out and been able to stop a lot of the terrorist financing that was going on. So I do this out of an oath to the Army and the soldiers and their families, because I seriously think treason has been committed. And I say that because Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer, when they worked at the Department of Justice, prosecuted Brad Birkenfeld, the Swiss banker, to cover this up. And I know they also worked for the law firm Covington and Burling, which represented Union Bank of Switzerland, which is the key bank Brad exposed. And Hillary Rodham Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, coordinated State Department activities to prosecute Brad Birkenfeld in conjunction with the Department of Justice. So this whole thing is just absolutely dirty and corrupt, and stinks of treason and a demand for congressional inquiry. Now, you would think Congress and stalwart leaders who proclaim to be champions of the Constitution, they've all sworn an oath, as I have, Rand Paul and Mark Udall and all the guys up there. Rand Paul has done a little bit, but he hasn't done much. You would expect them to come riding on white horses to say, what is this all about? We just discovered that all these bank accounts, 19,000 of them, have been buried or conveniently lost, and the Department of Justice guys have worked for the law firm that represented the bank.
Hey, Scott.
And that conflict.
Scott, we've got our bottom of the hour break here. I'll give you a choice. If you can stay on and hold over the break and keep going, or we can get you on next week. It's up to you.
It's totally up to you, Mike.
Well, we'll keep you on for the rest of the show then, okay?
Okay.
All right, folks, we'll be right back in a couple minutes more with Alex Powers and Scott Bennett, who I'm glad could join us for this last half hour. We'll be right back, folks. Give us a couple minutes.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Good afternoon. Welcome. This is Mike Harris on Revolution Radio. Today is Thursday, October 16, 2014. We're on with Scott Bennett and my stand-in guest, Alex Powers. Alex, welcome back. And Scott, welcome.
Hey.
So anyway, Scott, go ahead. You're on with Alex Powers, who's another Veterans Today, insider. Alex has worked in the Pentagon, and he's been in Iraq. What were you with the Ministry of Oil over there, Alex?
I was with the CPA, Coalition Provisional Authority, but I worked in the Ministry of Oil for the coalition. No, I've read your Scott's bio. We have. I mean, I don't want to. I want him to finish his thing, but he's very, very credible. I trust me. I'm listening, and I understand. I know exactly, unfortunately, what he's going through. Maybe not directly, but I understand that he probably stumbled upon, obviously, the black budget operation stuff, and these guys don't want that out there. And he's a patriot for at least making it public. So listen, I'm just gonna listen, okay? But
okay, all right.
Pleasure being
on. Scott, why don't you carry on? Where were we before we took the break here? Let's get.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that.
The chat room is on fire with this news.
Well, I have to apologize for being tardy, but I have been suffering some major attacks technologically. My computer's been going down. The power's been going out in our complex. You could explain it as a storm-related incident, but it's very suspicious that it's never happened before in the last year until I started doing all these interviews, and suddenly power and things are going out. My cell phone froze. So if you lose me, make sure you call me back. But just know there are some very sketchy things that are going on. Now that doesn't alarm me at all. I mean, I'm an Army officer, a special operations officer. I know how to handle these things, and I've very safely insured myself should anything ever happen. But I just wanted you to know there are things afoot, and that's all the more reason to really make this known quickly to as many people as possible, because, yeah, theoretically they could try and take me out as they've done to Webb and others, but that doesn't scare me. That doesn't intimidate me in the least. My ultimate authority and accountability is to God above, and my second authority and accountability is to the United States of America and the Constitution and the Army and all that which I joined to become an officer for. It's very important to understand that officers take an oath to the Constitution. They do not take an oath to their superior officers. Enlisted soldiers do. They take an oath to follow the orders given to them by their officers. However, an officer can decline any order that they deem inappropriate or treasonous or unconstitutional, and their ultimate authority is to the Constitution. So when I started digging and making noise and writing reports and seeing stuff that was just absolutely incompetent from a military point of view and a special operations point of view, I mean, I'll admit I'm a little unorthodox in my skills and abilities and how I imagine things. I came out of an advertising Hollywood creative background, and that's the whole reason I went into psychological warfare. But I went into it as someone trying to solve a problem. I was told we were in a war because a bunch of savages from the Middle East crashed their planes into our Pentagon and our World Trade Towers. Come to find out much later, there's quite a different story, which is not the official story. But at the time, I was told that. I bought into it and never expected our government to lie or any sort of psychological warfare on its own people. So I joined and I became an officer and went into special operations and psychological warfare. And I went in to end the war and get out to come home after we finished this. I did not jump in to start a major industrial military complex or be part of the machine or grow from captain to general and retire and then go on Fox News and talk or go into the defense contracting world and make $500,000, a year. No, I went in to serve my country, and I did it in the Bush administration when I worked there for 2003 to 2008, and I did it in the military. I was given a direct commission. Now, that's quite different because that means I'm brought into the military to do a very specific task and bring my skill sets, just like a doctor, just like a lawyer, anyone with a professional background. Is given a direct commission if they are really good and meet the cut. Well, I was apparently good enough, and they brought me in, as General Myers and Rumsfeld had encouraged me to do personally, and I went in and immediately started, going around trying to untangle knots and fix things that looked, problematic and settle, little feuds and just trying to get our military up and running, trying to enhance its capabilities. And immediately when I started doing that, overturning apple carts, I started finding myself being pushed out and isolated. And next thing I know, I'm indicted by the Justice Department for wearing my uniform and filling out a base housing form incorrectly. And the first time in the history of the United States of America that has ever happened. And they quickly threw me into a prison in Pennsylvania and never gave me any military counsel. And this has taken 2 years. I just got out in February, and I went right to the street and started sending out all the material that I've had when I was trying to get out in prison. I immediately started getting it out. And this is sort of the fruit of that. And again, I'm very thankful that there are men of character and strength who are not going to take the subjugation slave mentality that the bureaucratic intelligentsia in this country are trying to foist upon us. But you are actually standing up and saying, let's talk about this.
Well,
I have nothing to hide, and everything I'm saying. Yeah, I have nothing to hide, and everything I'm saying is completely honest, and it'll be corroborated by Edward Snowden. It'll be corroborated by Brad Birkenfeld. It'll be corroborated by Joe Naccio. Now, in case you do lose me in any of this, I would encourage people, if they're interested and want to see and read more of this, to go on the YouTube channel where Project Camelot has the interview that I did for 3 hours. And also it's on Kevin Barrett's website. And I've got my website where I've got all these documents uploaded, armypsyop.wix.com/Scott Bennett, which I'm sure you can put up on your site for people to follow. And they can go and see and download and get every piece of paper and every document and make a judgment for themselves. They will see the report. They will see the congressmen and senators that it was sent to. They'll see Martin Dempsey, General Martin Dempsey. It was sent to him multiple times. It was sent to General Odierno, his first name is Jeff Odierno.
Yeah.
It was sent to General Jeff Jones at U.S. Civil Affairs Psychological Operations Command in Fort Bragg. It was sent to the Pentagon Inspector General. It was sent to the Senate Armed Services Committee, the House Armed Services Committee, the Terrorism Committee, Peter King, Jason Shavitz, Charles Grassley, who personally knew Birkenfeld and all these Swiss banks issue. I sent Charles Grassley multiple letters pleading for congressional debriefing, pleading for someone to talk to me to say, look, Brad Birkenfeld may be silent because they've threatened him, but I'm not, and I'm an officer of the United States, and I have an oath and a duty to report this matter because I see it as treason. Aid and comfort and money has been given to terrorists that we are sending our soldiers to fight, and they are getting killed by the bombs and bullets and the roadside explosives that is being purchased through these Swiss banks. And no one ever talked to me about this, not a single person. And it was the most confirming experience to see that people's instincts of the government being corrupt and lazy is absolutely spot on. They are. They're amazingly corrupt, fearful, and complicit in this. And the American people really need to stand up, organize, go to their places of worship, go to their university clubs, go to their bowling leagues, wherever they have team activities, wherever they coagulate together as little tribal organizations sort of things, and share this. Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, it does not matter. This is an issue that affects every American citizen because it's very simple. It's very mathematical. Brad Birkenfeld brought 19,000 bank accounts to the Department of Justice. He was in prison for it and silenced. Beforehand, he had been targeted by the CIA for those accounts. The CIA, when Snowden was an analyst in Geneva, approached Birkenfeld, got him in a DUI, then got him out of prison, and tried to pressure him into material. Snowden saw all that, which he reported to Glenn Greenwald on The Guardian, and that was one of the things that turned him. Now, Snowden also saw my report in September 25th, 2012, 9 months before he went public about all this stuff. And he saw Birkenfeld. He recognized his role. He also recognized Booz Allen Hamilton. Dov Zakheim was my boss at Booz Allen Hamilton at U.S. Central Command. Dov Zakheim was the guy who lost $2.3 trillion at the Pentagon, supposedly to Israel purchases. And the money trail that was being audited by Navy guys, all those auditors were killed on September 11th in the Pentagon attacks.
Yeah, 35
and others.
35 of the auditors were killed that day. 35 out of the 50. We've been covering this very closely on Veterans Today. This is one of our top priorities, is to get to the bottom of this, and we've already confirmed your story from multiple sources. So you're in good company here, and keep going.
Well, it was all these revelations that I started discovering, and my personality was, being raised in a Scottish family, I guess. I was very tenacious and aggressive, and as an old friend of mine from the Korean War said, Scott, it's in your DNA to challenge bullshit. And when I saw bullshit, I immediately started digging and pouncing and making noise and making reports. And I remember going into rooms and briefings full of every government agency you can imagine that is part of our counterterrorist operation. And the generals asking for feedback of how to win this war, because generals aren't necessarily the brightest and most creative people. They just know how to run certain military systems and technology. Well, that doesn't take a lot. I mean, anybody can be trained to pull a lever and press a button multiple times over 30 years. But to come in with creative solutions, psychological warfare messaging that gets into the heart and mind of the radical extremists is a different sort of style. So I saw rooms full of government bureaucrats. When the generals are asking questions and suggestions, not a single person raises their hand. And it struck me that this is intolerably incompetent. And of course, I would raise my hand and make suggestions. And immediately that started putting me on the radar. This guy's out of line. He's making noise. He's not one of us. And soon after that, this whole avalanche consumed me. Now, they didn't think I'd dig my way out. They thought I would curl into a fetus position and just give up. But by the grace of God, I run into Brad Birkenfeld, and he and I put together the whole synthesized story of his bank account experience with Department of Justice and Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer. And by the way, Barack Obama was on the committee in the Senate that originally heard Brad Birkenfeld's testimony. That's extremely significant. The President of the United States, who later had the Union Bank of Switzerland chairman of the Americas, Robert Wolf, joined his team as a major financial contributor. You can just connect the dots, and you see Carl Levin, John McCain, Barack Obama, and everybody else on the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations needs to be examined and audited by the people of the United States, and you're the media, you're the ones who are going to take this forward to say, Birkenfeld gave you 19,000 accounts, many of which were funding terrorist activities, and you did not give these to the military. You did not give these to Scott Bennett because that was his job. His job was to track these money sources. Had he these bank accounts, had you given these to him or any other military operative, this whole war would have been drastically different. As it is,
that's the thing, Scott. That a lot of people miss is that the fighters in the field, the guys who are ISIS today, they're making about $200 a month, and the minute you quit paying them, they're going to go away. So it doesn't do any good. You can kill those guys all day long. They're just going to keep recruiting more, and you have to go after the material support for terrorism. And I've done interviews on Press TV. I've done interviews in the FAR News Service discussing this exact issue. And I have not been able to get our government to take any action toward going after the material support of terrorism. And so the conclusion I reached is that our own military-industrial complex is where the money's coming from to fund these terrorist organizations, so we can create an enemy to go fight to get bigger budgets every year.
Yeah. That's exactly right. But see, the thing is, you can always follow the money. You can always track it down, and that's the beautiful thing about numbers. You can track down the money accounts and the banks that they came from, and the Walhallas and the couriers, and the donor families and the big people and the shadow organizations and the everything is traceable, because money doesn't just disappear. It comes from somewhere, and you can always track it down. And ultimately, you will find these money sources. You know, if you work backwards and you say, okay, the money is in the pocket of this ISIS guy, the savage who's going around, you know, raping Yazidi women and children and little girls and beheading them. Let's start with this animal that we all agree we want to kill, but let's work backwards and say, how did he get the money to keep him doing this? Well, the money came out of his pocket, and it came from and you do the island hopping campaign from the geographic region. It's all from, I mean, there's big links in Israel, there's big links in Iraq, of course there's Iran, but Iran in the ISIS situation, they're not funding ISIS, they're funding against them, because ISIS being, as you know, Sunni is I mean, they've got a death wish for all Shia. But you track the money from the ISIS characters, and ultimately you get to Kuwait, you get to Qatar, you get to the United Arab Emirates, you get to Saudi Arabia, and you get to a lot of the big rich donors that are channeling their money to Swiss bank accounts because they're neutral and they're airtight and they're dark and no one can see them. And they're going into organizations and 501c3s within the bank that then filter this money out, money laundering. And I was trained in that. So I knew exactly how things were done. I have hours and days of military training and intelligence agency training on specifically the financial analysis of terrorism. And they just never expected me to jump ship and really begin to make noise and report this matter. They expected me to be a good military industrial complex person and just continue this endless global war for the ultimate geopolitical agenda, destabilizing the Middle East and then using that to destabilize Russia, Iran, and China. So we see they're kind of bracing against us by formation of BRICS economic partnership. I think besides the economic realities, they're also looking at the military agenda of the next 10, 15 years. And I think we've bitten off more than we can chew, and we really need to stop as a nation and analyze this. And first of all, let's examine where we have boils and wounds and cleanse them. And this big finance terrorist account from Swiss banks and the Brad Birkenfeld saga needs to be examined. Now, Brad and I had always discussed, when he gets back in front of Congress, which he was expecting to do the minute he walked out of prison, before they paid him $104 million to be quiet, he said, Scott, I'm going to get back in front of Congress, I'm going to get back into a Senate committee, and I'm going to say all of these bank accounts that were going to terrorists, I tried to get to the military and I was stopped. I want you as Congress to examine this. But don't ask me, Brad Birkenfeld, ask Scott Bennett, who's the military person who I met in prison, and he will explain all of these Swiss banking, connections. And that's what we were hoping for. Ultimately, that's what we hope for in the future, but it's going to have to be forced into Congress, it seems, because no one in Congress is doing anything or want to do anything about it. I had conversations with Buck McKeon, who is his staff. Buck McKeon is the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, and I talked to his staff, and I sent him copies of the report, and I said, this is a very serious threat to our soldiers and our military. What are you going to do about it? Well, we're not going to do anything. You have to approach your local congressman to do it. And I said, I'm not approaching the congressman as a constituent. I'm approaching you as a military officer of the United States, and this is treason, and I'm making it known to you. This is an official whistleblowing report, and I am protected under the federal law 1034, which is whistleblowers of the United States military will not have negative punitive action taken against them, and all conversation is privileged. I am making this known to you. you need to investigate this. You need to share this with your committee members. Not a single thing has been done. Not a single response. The only thing that happened...
Let me interject here for a minute, because there is something called a writ of mandamus.
Yes.
And that's what you file against office holders who refuse to do their job.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to file a writ of mandamus against the chairman of the Armed Services Committee. I'm just saying.
Well, I like that idea. I have become sort of a accidental master of law in the last 2 years, and I've studied with some of the best lawyers that I knew in prison, and that's exactly right. I do have, by the way, a lawsuit against Booz Allen Hamilton and the Department of Defense for all of this. But you're exactly right. A writ of mandamus could be the perfect instrument. Now, one of the things that can be useful are lawyers who can come around this and help develop the legal instruments to file in federal court. So I would encourage any lawyers who have a gift for this area and a hunger to please contact you, to please contact me, and we'll file the appropriate documents. I have no fear and no hesitation to file any legal federal instrument or state instrument to begin to advance this and make this known. So I think that's a very good idea.
And I have a question from the chat room for you. Do you have any insight onto who may be funding this Ebola that's spreading through the country like crazy?
Well, I wouldn't.
It was just a lark question. I know that's not your area of expertise, but it's from the chat room, and they're curious.
I could speculate, but it wouldn't really do much.
What's your speculation on this? What's your best guess?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think the Ebola thing is a major psychological warfare tactic that they're employing against the people of the United States, because there is no threat of a death sickness to people who are in good health, eat healthy, get sunshine, are of a certain racial gene character, too. There's been a lot of studies in certain racial groups are more susceptible to certain kinds of diseases. So that could explain some of the susceptibility. I don't know too much on the scientific analysis, but I would say from a psychological warfare perspective, this is being greatly inflated, if not entirely invented, to dissuade and, again, keep people in fear, keep them suppressed, keep them on their heels instead of moving forward, which when people do, the government, backs up, and the military and the intelligentsia and the intelligence communities back up. But this is a tactic to keep people scared, I think.
Well, I agree with that, and I was talking with Alex earlier about Ebola. We were talking about the fear that whenever I was a child, we had to get under our desk in school and get in the fetal position because of the nuclear bombs that were going to be raining on our head any moment. Yeah. And they've kept this country in fear since the 1950s and 60s. And it's time that we stop living in fear and that we address these traitorous criminals who have infiltrated our government at every level. And what I'm hearing from you, that this is not something you said, but I'm reading between the lines here, is that this corruption is so widespread in Washington, D.C., it's pandemic within our Congress, is what I've heard you not say.
Yeah, Congress is absolutely the first ones who should be, tarred and feathered and ran out of office on a rail because of their despicable, absolutely repugnant behavior in regards to this. Not a single member of Congress since 2012, and I have been writing letters at a typewriter in a prison and submitting reports, not just from the prison, but sending it out to family and friends with instructions to send it out to the media and to congressmen. Not a single person ever responded except Rand Paul.
Well, Scott, I hear our break music coming up. I will invite you back on next week. I'll circle back to you, and we'll get you scheduled back on, because this is a fascinating story, and this deserves the highest level of scrutiny from everyone, and all of our listeners to write to their own congressmen and get them to look into this. You're not going to let this fall. So.
God bless you, Mike. You stay safe.
Scott, thank you so much, and Alex, thank you very much too. Everybody, we'll be back tomorrow. My guest is Frosty Woolridge tomorrow, so tune in for that, okay? Everybody, bye-bye.